afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. This is the Salina City Planning Commission, and we will begin with approval of minutes from our last meeting, which was July 16th.
Move to accept.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes as read. All those in favor vote aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. For tonight, we have a public hearing item, or we don't, actually. Or we do. A legislative matter, number 3.1, application Z19-4, filed by the Salina City Planning Commission, requesting a comprehensive review and amendment of Section 4269, wireless communication facilities, and Section 4270, telecommunication right-of-way users, to bring Salina's zoning ordinance into conformance with state law and current FCC regulations. This is continued from our July 2nd meeting.
So I would be the staff member responsible for this ending up on this agenda item because I miscounted how many days there were between meetings. But what we have tried to do is we are working on two items currently with our city's legal counsel, one of which is dealing with signs in the right-of-way, and one of which is dealing with distributive antenna systems or antennas in the public right-of-way. We've tried to avoid having those on the same agenda, so we keep staggering them. But the one item that we didn't get real clear direction on from the commission July 2nd was we reviewed some different provisions, City of Manhattan, City of Overland Park, some others. And one of the things we discussed was the use of replacement poles, or particularly if we had ground-mounted equipment. And one of the things that the City of Manhattan had was they basically had a general across-the-board requirement that all utility boxes, equipment boxes be painted a camouflage flat green-gray color. And there was some discussion from the board about if we had situations at the traffic intersection where we had mounted on light poles or traffic poles that were metal or aluminum poles, whether we wanted the utility boxes to match the pole, or it is your preference that we specify a specific color. And one of the things we wanted, I'll have to have you scroll up, John. I have some language here that this is from one community's that says the visible exterior surfaces on small cell facilities, poles, antennas, vaults, equipment enclosures shall be finished with non-reflective materials and shall be painted to match as closely as possible the color and texture of the vertical infrastructure on which it is mounted. And so I was going to have the commission look at that, and the one thing it says there shall be constructed and finished with non-reflective materials. So at some of our intersections we have traffic signal equipment boxes, and they're kind of a shiny or silver galvanized metal. So our choices really are to say simply that the equipment, ground-mounted equipment boxes match the pole, or we can specify that it be finished with some sort of non-reflective camouflage color. Do you as a group here representing the community feel like we should specify up front a specific color for equipment boxes, or simply allow the color of the box to match the pole that it's serving?
Does everyone remember that discussion? And we had some different viewpoints about it.
We did
I
have
know
some
Mr. Bappa had a viewpoint, and I thought all of us decided we wanted it to be as inconspicuous as possible. So of the two choices,
Okay, so you'd prefer the flat, non-reflective surface and specify that it be something like the city of Manhattan specified,
that would
where
be
it'd be
my
like a
choice.
utilitarian dull gray or
Exactly.
green camouflage.
Yeah, I think this is
So-
what I
Mhm.
said last
Okay.
meeting.
There seemed to be some indication that at least in my notes, that where, like if you were at Belmont in Ohio, which has the shiny steel traffic signals and shiny boxes there for the utilities, that if you had it there, that you would want the boxes to match the shiny poles, but it would be your preference if we had something mounted there, that the box be as inconspicuous as possible.
That was my understanding.
think
I know we talked about shiny, shiny versus shiny, non-shiny, but I thought it was shiny, non-shiny. So,
Okay.
I
Well, I mean,
I think
there's-
of an overall, the boxes are bigger than the
Yeah.
poles.
So, yeah, what the city of Manhattan says, says it doesn't really matter what, if the pole is this or that or this, the box has to be a dull gray camouflage, and we can set it up that way. That is a primary input that we needed from you this evening, other than a motion to continue this to September 3rd, at which time we will have a draft for you to debate and make your recommendation on. So that is primarily what we needed to clarify, and so as I understand from the city attorney, he's closer on the signs than he is on this, but we do have a master license agreement that the utility, the phone wireless service providers are reviewing, but we expect sometime this fall to get some official request from either Cox Cable or from Verizon, or possibly from US Cellular was the one that you met with, Dustin. So what we'd be looking for is a motion to continue the hearing on this item to your September 3rd meeting, and then we'll discuss some of the other business we have for you today.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move this to our September 2nd, did you say? I don't want to get it wrong this time.
September 3rd.
September 3rd meeting. All those in favor vote
Yes.
aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And in addition to getting the chairman to sign a whole bunch of things, the other reason we wanted to meet today was you should have at your places here what the city clerk is showing as the current makeup and terms of our members. And we wanted to talk about a couple things. One is that if not the next meeting, the meeting following, the city commission will appoint members to the various community boards and commissions. And it's our understanding that although Mr. Linkowitz's term expires, he's eligible for another term and has submitted an expression of interest form. And is that correct for you as well, Spencer?
Yes.
Okay, so Spencer is not graduating. He's still going to be a youth member, and he has expressed interest in continuing.
Good job,
So-
Spencer.
So, on the other hand, Mr. Story has been on 2 terms, and his term will expire at the end of August, and there will be a member appointed to replace him. But that will be the only turnover on the board. The other thing that Dustin and I were questioning, if you look at the bottom of page 1 there, it indicates that Mr. Freiberger's on his 2nd term and that Ms. Good and Ms. Jackson are on their 1st terms, and we were of the belief that you were on your 2nd term. Okay, so we were going to get that corrected, because it seemed to us that you were been on as long as Owen has, so.
Well, it was a little later, actually, because I was chair when they came on.
We were like a month late.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you were stragglers, but you were,
We renewed.
yeah. So, the rest of the members are in their 1st term. Mr. Lang was filling an unexpired term. Mr. Baff is on his 2nd term, and Mr. Olson's on his 1st term. So we wanted you to review all those to make sure that we have that correct. And then the other thing we wanted to talk about is that we will still see who our new appointment is. We'll still, at one of our meetings in September, have our annual meeting, and you will choose your chair and vice chair. But the thing that we'll figure out how to do differently this year, as it came up last year, that there's an ordinance from the 1960s that says that the mayor shall appoint, the mayor appoints all planning commission members, but it also says the mayor shall appoint a planning commission member to serve on the BZA and a planning commission member to serve on the Heritage Commission. So what we'll do is we'll still ask for interest and willingness and availability to serve, and then we will provide that name to the mayor, but they'll actually be, instead of the commission having a nomination and a vote to have Mr. Baffa represent them on the Heritage Commission, that would go to the city commission and mayor for a resolution that would appoint the representatives to the BZA and to the Heritage Commission. So we will, it may, we'll try to expedite that as much as possible, because we could have a BZA meeting in September and we can't really be in limbo as to knowing who on the planning commission is our representative. So,
Would I have to fill out an interest form?
no, we would conduct our meeting like we normally would. We would ask who has an interest in serving on the Heritage Commission or BZA, and we would essentially have the planning commission nominate whoever they want to nominate to be their representative on the Heritage Commission or the BZA, and then the mayor would ratify that nomination or find somebody else if they so chose. But that is the primary thing that we wanted to bring up in discussing our transition, that everyone's terms technically expire at the end of August, but we turn right around and meet in September 3rd. Sometimes we've been really late on getting appointments, and we have like 2 days to figure out who the name is and get the packet out. So we just want people to think ahead. For all of you whose terms aren't expiring, it's just going to be the normal course of business. We'll send a packet out for the September 3rd meeting, and it'll either be the 3rd or the 17th, where we'll have our annual business meeting and discuss officers and those types of things. Is there any questions about terms or transitions or any of those things? I think, like I said, the only real change or turnover will be that Mr. Story is going off at the end of August, and there'll be a individual appointed to replace him. And we haven't looked at the Board of Zoning Appeals yet, but Mr. Perney, who's the chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals, said he was not going to submit a expression of interest to be reappointed. So I'd have to look to see what the turnover will be there. Has everybody got a good feel for the only real change is, instead of you picking your representative, the mayor will pick it based on your nomination or recommendation. So,
Is anybody interested in the Heritage Commission?
Well, I have the same question because I've been on the Board of Zoning Appeals long enough, so somebody else is certainly welcome to do that. The 3rd of September, just to note, I have a conference and we'll be in Denver then, so.
okay. And for the 3rd of September, we actually have some real planning projects coming forward instead of text amendments. There is it's currently in the ownership of Salina Regional Health Center, but they are in the process of transferring ownership of the former Salina Women's Clinic on Claflin over to Kansas Wesleyan. They plan to convert that into a freestanding nursing school facility, but for some historical reasons, it's zoned R2 multifamily residential, so they are seeking to rezone that. And then they have some property on Kerwin as well, that they'd like to make University District as part of their campus, so that will be on your September 3rd agenda. And then Bill Shepard, who has been the lead developer on the Grand Prairie Edition, which kind of fingers up into the golf course on the north side of Cedar Ridge Drive. There is one phase left that is unbuilt between holes on the golf course, and his proposal is to take what's currently platted as 18 lots, subdivide each of them to create 36 lots, and then to build what I would refer to as courtyard or patio homes with virtually no yards that are on 50-foot lots, designed for people who don't want a lot of yard maintenance. And so it is kind of a different housing product than we have traditionally seen. And so the plans for that will be presented at your September 3rd meeting.
Mr. Baffa, will you be here?
Pardon?
You're vice chair, are you not?
No, Greg is.
Doesn't it say that you are on here?
Yep, they've got you listed wrong, so that's
So
another
it's-
thing.
Actually, Greg.
It is Greg, so we will get that information to the clerk as well. We'll get Commissioners Good and Jackson as showing on their second term, and we'll get Greg shown as vice mayor and make sure he knows that you will not be present for that meeting. We will probably meet on the 20th and discuss signs in the right-of-way. There is it's what we call a commission information memorandum, and we also have a handout that we're giving all people running for office, but we've created a 2-page handout on election signs, rules, and limitations, and essentially, due to state legislation, there's virtually no limitations or rules the 45 days leading up to the election. So if you say that you've seen signs that are campaign signs in the right-of-way between the sidewalk and curb, we can't do anything about it because the legislature has decreed that that's allowed in the period leading up to the election. And so that is, there was a number of cities were not allowing for that under the apprehension that the legislature, which is very flawed and poorly written, that the legislature would go back in and fix it, but they've had 2 tries now and they have not fixed it. So now cities are just living with it. And so essentially for 45 days leading up to the November election, there are virtually no rules on placement of campaign signs. So, of course, if someone places one on your property that you don't like, you can certainly remove it. But one thing the legislature didn't tell us was, can I put a sign in the right-of-way in front of your house that's not your property without your permission? So they haven't been very clear about that. But I think if somebody put any type of sign in my yard or my right-of-way that didn't belong there, I would simply remove it. So
Thank you. Any other business?
the only other thing we'd point out, we provided you some planning news things, and we'll let Mr. Baffa indicate how much communication and relation there is. But one of the things that it indicates in that article is that they hope that planners will get to know their historic preservation partners as part of expanding their horizons to become more aware of historic preservation, and I think having a Heritage Commission and having a historic preservation planner, I think we do a pretty good job of incorporating historic preservation into our planning functions, but we just put that in there to indicate that sometimes we don't always bring preservation or historic preservation to the top of the list when we're looking at some of our projects or ideas, so. But unless the board has any questions for our members of staff, we don't have anything else for you other than to get this cleaned up and correct with the clerk's office.
Thank you. Yes.
I noticed that behind Cadoba, they did fix the parking lot.
Yes, and Central Mall has done some selective patching. It's somewhat improved, but the overall effect is still not great, so.
But Tractor Supply has the absolute worst parking lot in the city.
Okay, you're talking about on Riffle and 9th Street there? Okay.
And then Aldi's landscaping,
Mm-hmm.
looks like, they put it in and forgot about it. And there's weeds and dead plants. And then, is something going in between Panera and Chipotle?
What we think is happening is we think that Verizon is downsizing and Verizon is moving from the southwest corner of 9th and Magnolia into, there's a tenant space that's between Panera and Chipotle, and we think Verizon is moving in there.
That's going to create a void on the second
you-
busiest intersection. Huh?
You have, Verizon, they were leasing that facility, but through their vision and their funding, they really cleaned up and improved the appearance of that intersection. And not having them there as an occupant kind of leaves a question mark there. But related to that, and I've had some correspondence with them, but one thing that we do when a business opens before their landscaping is all complete is we have them give us financial assurances, usually in the form of a certified check in amount of 125% of the amount of the cost of the landscaping to ensure that it's done and done according to plans. That particular development there, the Chipotle and Panera's, we are still holding their money after an extended period of time because they still have not finished out their landscaping, and Dustin and I have met on site with them, but they had a original contractor that put it in. They have a local contractor that's trying to maintain it. They don't see eye to eye. They don't have an agreed upon fix-it plan, although we gave that. But as we look at that, we'll also look at Aldi's. It's good to take a close look because planners had that on our list as a possible award nominee. But one of the things that we look at is and that's while we think that Exchange Bank turned out well, we always try to pause when we have a new business in a new location to see it. It usually looks good when it's first installed, but the real test is, are they going to maintain it and keep it alive and thriving? And so when we look at landscape awards, we're looking at two things. We're looking at the design and the execution, but we're also looking at, do they take pride in it and do they maintain it? And so when we suggest some project for nomination, we're looking at both the original design, but also is it being maintained so that it doesn't become something that detracts.
Aldi did look good when it was new, but
Do we ever give the awards a second time? for people that do
Yeah, I
that
mean,
sort of thing.
and we could, I mean, conceivably, if we have given one and the people have maintained or even stepped up their maintenance or done some tweaks to it, then yes, so whether we want to call it ongoing maintenance or,
Mhm.
you know,
Well,
they're
Chick-fil-A is an
still, they're
example
still
of that. It just always
contributing.
looks better and better and
They're
better.
still contributing to
So
the
bye-bye.
visual environment of the community, and that's kind of the criteria for the award, is if you think a project or a property is contributing to the visual environment of the city, that should be recognized.
Mhm.
So if you've got one of those, we'd certainly consider it.
Well, Chick-fil-A, they had a lot of weeds growing and some dead plants, and they took care of it right away.
It just looks better every time I see it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always prefer if they take notice of that themselves. However, I have, as I was out doing inspections for fireworks stands and got to look at some of the landscape areas more closely, I found that even some of the city's landscaped areas and islands have
Mhm.
thistle and things
Yeah.
that have snuck in there that are not good. So we need to set the example for everybody else. So. But the wet period in early summer certainly allowed weeds to go to town.
And then what's happening at St. John's Hospital?
John, did you give an update to the Heritage Commission on that?
Yes, we did give an update to the Heritage Mission at the regular meeting. And what we've heard from the State Preservation Office is the National Park Service has returned the application a second time to them requesting additional information. They had originally had the first draft come back to them. They supplied the National Park Service the necessary documentation, usually photographs, showing where new buildings and old buildings match and what they would look like if one was taken down. And this is the second go-around, so it is actually back at the State Preservation Office. They're working with the owner, Sunflower, to go back in there a second time and do photographs. So it's ongoing. Generally, the decision is reached in 45 days, but this has slowed it down certainly. But on a good note is they were approved at the state level for the state register, and that is equal to 25% rehabilitation tax credits in any case. So the staff at the state office has encouraged them to go ahead with the National Register tax form and get that going. So I think they view that favorably on what they can get done.
So one of the advantages in Kansas, if such severe like the Lee Building project, is that you can stack the state historic preservation tax credit with the federal credit, so that adds up essentially to a 45% tax credit. And so there is an advantage to being both on the state and federal register. We don't have a very good explanation. We've never, I would, from my perspective, the St. John's Hospital is more worthy of a National Register status than the Norton Apartments on East Iron. But the Norton Apartments on East Iron were approved to be put on the National Register in about 20 days. And we are on, I can't, John's done a timeline, but I can't even track how long the National Park Service has had the nomination for St. John's Hospital and not approved it, so. But the Lee Building is moving ahead thanks to, in part to, the tax credits that they're able to. So what they can do is they can turn the tax credits into equity. They sell the tax credits to some investor that needs them, and then they use the proceeds to put it into the project. So it's a source for the developers to get equity to put into their project, and that's why it's valuable.
And then, they're talking about the demise of Penny's, and so basically we'd pretty much have an empty mall. And has a mall ever been converted into condos that you're aware of?
In some cases, it requires partial demolition or repurposing, but it's difficult to take a store, a large, big box store, and turn it into condominiums. We have seen things like community colleges and things like that, where malls have been turned into things like community colleges and those types of things. But even some malls in larger cities are seeing, partial demolitions. There's entire malls like Metro North in Kansas City and Bannister Mall in Kansas City that don't exist anymore. They've just been completely leveled and the sites repurposed. So that seems to be more common than the conversion.
It seems to me that maybe Dillard's could be turned into inside parking, and there could be convenience stores inside and cleaners and barber shops and.
Well, it's going to, it's probably going to take everyone's creative thinking caps to repurpose the mall, because the direction it's going, it's not
Yeah.
likely to revive as a traditional mall.
A major
so.
change in internet commerce. Do we have upcoming study sessions on any subjects that are relevant? I heard something about a study session on the improvement of Markley Road and Holmes Road.
There was a study session, which we can furnish the information to you. It was, I think when in the end it was 50 slides long. The city commissioner's eyes were glazed over when they were done, and we were asking for direction at the end of the study session, and they asked to take it up again in 2 weeks. But we can provide that information to you. It affects you from the standpoint that a lot of the platting activity in that area is being held up by the perimeter road and the perimeter road financing issues. And the whole purpose of that study session was to discuss options for funding perimeter streets and how that can be done through existing benefit district law. And so we can certainly, we've got copies of those, and we'd be happy to provide those.
Yeah, I think
With your
that's
next
important
packet.
because that subject comes up whenever we're talking about Magnolia Hills,
Right.
whenever
Or
we're looking
Wheatland
at
Valley is-
expansion.
is the other
Exactly.
one.
And I think, I didn't know that occurred, so until, I guess, after the fact. But I would like to know more about the subject and
And
what topics were covered.
you can tell us whether you want to broaden the subject. We have looked at it from that standpoint, but we would perhaps like to have an upcoming study session to talk about the Broadway corridor plan, the changes to that plan when the consultant became aware that Kmart was closing, and some of the same issues associated with repurposing Central Mall come into play, both of the Kmart building and that property in that general area. So we would like to have a study session with the commission to relook at the Broadway corridor, which we've spent a lot of time on, but with the closing of Kmart presents some other challenges and opportunities. So, but we would be happy to furnish each of the commissioners the packet for the study session. We had the city's bond counsel come out from Kansas City and present that. It wasn't done by staff, and it was very detailed. But we'd be happy to let you take a look at it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and then Dillon's on Crawford, is that right? They're remodeling, and do they plan to do some of the changes that the planner recommended to the parking lot and the gas station?
And a short answer, no. We asked them that same question, and their answer to us was, no, thank you. We don't think that they have a phase 1 and a phase 2 project, and we put them on notice that when they get to phase 2, they're going to have to implement a number of the things that are in that plan. but they chose to ignore it as part of their Phase 1. So when we have a redevelopment project, if you reach a certain threshold investment-wise, you have to take into account site landscaping and some of those other things. We asked them point blank in our plan review. The plans that they were showing for their parking lot did not take into account any location for a fueling station. And it was our understanding that the sole reason that Dillon's renewed their lease was because they saw the plans that the Broadway Corridor consultant put together and concluded that it was feasible to have a fueling station there, which was a prerequisite for them renewing their lease. But the architects working for them, I don't know. I use the border between blowing us off and ignoring us, but Dustin and I raised that question to them, and they basically responded that it was none of our business. So. It's disappointing, but it may, when they go to do Phase 2, we'll pull out our notes and our comments that we made the first time and remind them of what we told them. So,
Well, at least it's getting a facelift in Phase 1.
yes.
So hopefully
The
they'll
emphasis is on the
understand.
facelift and less emphasis
Integration.
on the site, but they're doing it in phases, and this is Phase 1 of a 2-part renovation, so.
Anything else? No? Staff?
Wally's not here.
No. Wally's not here.
To make the motion to
Oh, right,
adjourn.
to make a motion for adjournment. Do you have anything else,
No,
Mr. Andrew or
does
Mr.
Krista want a
Harris?
motion to adjourn, so.
You do?
She does like a motion to
I
adjourn.
know she does. So I've started doing
I
it
so
just for
move.
her.
We have a motion to
Wait, you see
adjourn
the
from
second?
Ms. Jackson.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor vote aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Glad we don't have to wait for Mr. Story to adjourn.
Yes. What will we do
right.
after, well, he won't be back, will he?
He may be back for the next meeting. I knew he was going to miss this meeting, but we'll see if we can get him back for one last hurrah.
Thank you very much.
We potentially would meet on the 20th before his term expires, so. I think you can still beat the parade.
What's that?
I said, until about 12 o'clock, I forgot we had a meeting today. I haven't looked down at a desk calendar, I'm like, oh crap.
Yeah. That on my calendar.
Well, I usually expect a novelty. A laptop that doesn't have to be plugged in.
That's right, the French tonight is
You have a 6 o'clock meeting anyway, though. Isn't, I thought I saw in the paper something about the drinking on downtown? But, you know, the
Thank you.
outdoor dining, I thought that was tonight at 6.
Something that STI is doing. We're having a meeting next Wednesday at 6, part of our ongoing downtown arts and entertainment steering committee ordinance,
The paper
but
said that it was today.
is that something that STI is doing? They can have an outdoor dining meeting without me, but it's just.